So hello everyone, this is Mohit here from Master of Sales, and today we have Dushyant Joshi with us. He leads sales at Biro. They're a great company. Dushyant is great at sales, and we would love to hear his insights and views on many of the strategies which we'll be discussing. So yeah, once again, hello everyone. Welcome Dushyant. We'll start off with just a brief introduction on your journey, how you've been, how you have come into sales, what are some things which you like about it. So just a brief outlook.
Sure. Thanks, Mohit. Thanks for inviting me. Really appreciate it. Uh, so yeah, I've been a sales guy all my career actually. Started off in government, in the Ministry of IT, believe it or not. Cut my teeth there, figuring out how sales actually happens in government, which was, as you can imagine, really not really a the perfect start. But then yeah, I've been moving pretty much in the sales product sales cycles all my career. Uh, I graduated from India sales. So I was one of those people who used to carry a laptop and walk for a couple of kilometers in 50 degrees Gurgaon weather, and just walk for kilometers and kilometers. So started from there, uh, and moved on very quickly to the global sales arena. I've been managing global sales people spread across multiple countries for the last 6-7 odd years or so far. And yeah, I work here at Bero, and as you mentioned, we are pretty much into procurement consulting. We work with large, medium, small companies, about 10,000 odd companies across the world. And I head one of the divisions of a new client acquisition team, where team members are spread all across various locations. Yeah, so it's been a fascinating journey so far. And that's pretty much the answer to your question. I'm a sales guy through and through.
Great to hear that. So, during you have started your career, of course, in sales, and especially in government sales, I don't think many of us would have heard that government does sales. So, how has that transition been from government to corporate, or from?
It was a very short stint, about 18 months or so. And quite honestly, one of the reasons why we started there was that was the time when the Great Depression had hit, and people were practically scrambling for whatever you get. On the government front of it as well, I will not mention in detail about which division and all that. But there was an element of sales which they were testing us out with. We joined as interns, were paid the grand salary of 8,450 rupees a month, where 450 rupees was the food allowance living in Noida. So it was one of those things. The bigger challenge was that moving from government to corporate, and there is a lot of fear, there is a lot of negativity, and there is a lot of apprehension which you have in terms of how will it actually look like, right? And as you can imagine, it's not an easy shift to make. I'm not belittling government people who work in government at all. They do some fantastic job. And the system works because it is primarily designed to be a mass system, to be a huge scale system. So that's the way it has to work, with checks and balances. The corporate life was a bit difficult when we started, and it didn't help that I moved to Hyderabad, which was the first time I had ever been beyond Bombay in my life. And I moved to Hyderabad not knowing anything about Telugu or any people there, worked out of home, and basically just threw myself into the pool. So corporate life was interesting. It was challenging. As I said, I'm a hardcore sales guy. So it kind of worked out really, really well, from that transition from working in government to moving into corporate. Yeah, so that's pretty much how the journey went.
Sure. And what do you think were the skill sets which helps you in sales processes, especially when you're in regions where you don't know the local languages, because language plays an important role.
That happens a lot. That happens a lot with me, not just in India but outside as well. And that's really true. So if I may break down that question in two parts, right? One is sales principles which help, and the other is engaging with cultures, engaging with people where you might have a communication gap, or where you might not have any common frame of reference to talk about, right? So when it comes to selling or helping my team sell in locations or countries or cities or places where we have never been, I think I'm a big fan of simple best practices, right? Know your customer, know what you're selling, figure out, know what value you're giving, understand who are the key people, understand how to plan an account journey, understand how the sales journey has been planned, and execute it while keeping a review, right? They are called, I believe that they are called best practices because they work. It's not a complicated business. I see a lot of these people figuring out new complicated jargons and new ways of selling. Uh, I think as long as you sell value, uh, and you stick to those things which really, really work really, really well, and you execute them to the best of your ability and figure out a feedback loop, you'll always succeed, right? So my trick is to stick to best practices, stick to first principles, figure out who you're talking to, figure out what you're selling, figure out why they will buy, right? And that has helped us wherever you go, because wherever you go, people generally want to see value, right? They will invest in something which will give them exponential return. Now, those returns can be depending on what you are selling, right? If you are selling a transactional system, the returns are commensurate with the kind of transactions they are doing. If you are selling a strategic uh, product, or you are selling a service which is strategic in nature to their client's business, I'm sure you can do much more of a value addition there. So it really depends on how those best practices are structured. That's kind of what has helped me and my team uh, uh, excel at those places where we have never been. As you can imagine, we are called a new client acquisition team primarily because of that. The other thing is, the second part of your question was, how do you deal with people or cultures or countries or locations where you don't know language, where you don't know people? It helps if you're a really, really nice guy. Let me make it clear. Uh, it helps to have the gift of humor. It helps to be empathetic towards what they are going through, uh, which means you do read about what is happening. At one of my international career starts, I managed Australia as a region for about exclusively as a region for about 3 years. Uh, I must have made. I used to make one trip every month, if not two trips every month, over from Bombay for 3 years. I did that for overall 8 years. So I used to read Australian newspapers, right, just to get a sense of what's happening. Because as a country that is so far from where I was, being a national sales head, moving on to international, so you got to know your audience. And what helps all of you is, as I said, uh, be a nice guy. Understand that people are essentially people. They respond to a smile. They respond to good behavior and good nature. Uh, and try to understand where they're coming from. As long as you do that, uh, you should be able to find your way.
Yes, totally agree to that. After all, a human interaction is what precedes language, communication, everything. So, being good, having that body language sometimes means a lot of words. Totally get your point. What do you think would have changed in, let's say, when you started in sales to now? Because you mentioned about value which you are creating for the customer. Do you think that before, or maybe even now, there is a portion of relationship based selling where we ask people how they are, how their kids are, and things like that, and try to form that good understanding, and value is one part of it? Or do you think it has always been value and it's going to be value?
Actually, though, I think the question, you can probably rephrase it a little bit, because both of these things are not either or. A relationship based selling is a style of selling, right? There are people, you can still be doing a very transactional business. Look at hardware sales, right? It's a very transactional business. You're playing margins, right? You're talking 1%, 2%, 0.5% margins, right? So it's very transactional. You get very rarely the time in a transaction to go ahead and say, hey, how are you doing? How are your kids? But relationship, creating your long-term relationship is what helps in a in a transactional business, it's very counterintuitive if you think about it that way, right? If
Mm.
I have a customer who's giving me, let's say, where I'm doing 10 transactions a week, and we barely talk for like 30 seconds because these are just transactional, it helps that I know the customer a little bit more, right? So investing more in relationship really works in a transaction business. When it comes to strategic sales, right? When you're talking of organization level sales, selling a product, selling a large scale service, even if you're selling it at a departmental level, right? Relationships will always matter. As I said, being a good guy, being generally able to understand what the client is going through and what the client is doing is still important. Uh, you have to temper it with not coming across as fake. Uh, it's very hard. The typical mistake which a lot of sales guys do, and I cringe sometimes when I see that, is they try to get really pally very quickly, and that's not how the world works. Uh, One of the things which I always tell my team is, if somebody is trying to sell to you, you would figure it out, right? You would know that somebody is trying to sell to you. Why would you think that your customer can't figure out that you are selling to them, right? If you're coming across as too strong. So if you cringe, imagine what's happening to that guy. So relationship selling is always going to be there. It's always a very important part. A value-based selling is different from just relationship-based selling. It's not an either or, as I said. You will still sell value. Now, as I said, the value can be small, value can be large, value can be dependent on what value the customer gets. The value can be purely based on the ROI which the customer gets, can be based on productivity increases, can be based on a ton of factors, right? I'm a firm believer that you sell value and things fall in place. Uh, as long as the value is communicated nicely and the bridge between what the customer sees from your offering and the value he gets in his mind, that bridge is created properly by you. Because if you don't explain what he's going to get at the end of it, the customer will make their own bridge, and you never know where that will lead. So value-based selling will always be there. Relationship-based selling is always a
Always,
standard.
yes. Totally. Yes. Actually, in fact, these are two things which go hand in hand. If you're creating relationships, it is because of value, and you're creating value, and hence you could create. Totally agree to that.
Absolutely.
Now, in this phase where if you're talking about strategic sales and even transactional as a difference, how do you think technology has made it better or worse, or how do you think it has helped? In any ways.
Mohit, such a broad question. That it reminds me of those GD questions which you get during interviews, right?
I'm specifically talking about sales technology tools, not internet as such.
Kidding, man. No, I'm just kidding. But no, it definitely has helped. I mean, look at the whole pandemic years, right? I just called it pandemic years. But look at these last 1 or 2 years. Uh, Even though we believed, honestly, we used to believe, and I think a lot of sales people believed, sales management believed that there is no substitute to meeting people face to face. How will a guy sitting over in Europe, uh, give you, let's say, €500,000 worth of business without even meeting you, right, face to face? There is just no way you will get those deals. And business is working, right? And people have been selling multi-million-dollar deals without having met their customers, purely on the phone, purely on video conferencing, right? Part of it is because nobody can travel and people need to buy stuff and we need to sell stuff. But I think it has led to a fundamental shift as well. So technology has enabled uh, a lot of these sales to happen faster. It has enabled the value delivery part of it, as in the perception in the customer's mind of what value he is going to get. That perception has been the speed at which the customer understands has been escalated. Right? Earlier, I have to wait. I go and meet a customer. We talk about it. We go and meet somebody else. There are 3 people coming into the room. You do some WebExes. You are sitting there in the room. There is a lot of to and fro which used to happen anyway. Now what is happening is, because you are able to quickly collaborate and pull people in from a customer side as well as from your side, the gap between understanding what the value you are proposing and what value the customer sees, that gap has increased. So the timetable has kind of, technology has helped us accelerate that time. So you succeed or fail faster, if I may put it in a catchy phrase. right? And you're able to get a sense of where you are going much, much faster.
So, same continuing that, do you feel prospecting has become easier or has become more difficult? Because one thing is you get data, and second thing is everyone gets that data. So, prospecting by a good salesperson used to be a skill, which is not the best case right now. What's your view on that?
It's a very interesting point. I would say if I again break prospecting into two things, right? One is the job which an SDR team does, right? Setting up new meetings, setting
Right.
up meetings for the sales team. The other one is when the sales guy goes in and starts talking to somebody fresh for the first time and kind of figures out where they are. So the first part is slam bang in the middle of prospecting. The second part, a little bit of that has to do with the prospecting part of it as well. So it is tough. It has become tougher. We have our SDR teams as well, and we work very closely with our SDR team, some fantastic managers there. And we have realized that you're absolutely right. Everybody gets that data. Everybody has those mobile numbers, those landline numbers, which very few of them work, obviously, because people are not going to offices. But historically, compared to where we are and where we are now, we see an uptick in the number of whatever metric you pick up, whether you pick up number of meetings which have happened compared to last year, whether you pick up number of opportunities which have converted from meetings, whether you pick up what percentage of meetings are converted to closures or purchase orders, etc. By whichever standard you look at it, we have seen an uptick. It has improved big time, and that is primarily, some of it is obviously because of our improvements in the way we have been positioning our solutions. We have been talking about our messaging. Our product teams have done a fantastic job in creating a fantastic product. Marketing team does a brilliant job coming up collateral. The market knows us, so overall that helps. But some of it is also because of that reduction in the gap between what customers want and what you are selling, which I was referring to my last question. Now customers are much more, prospects are much more amenable to look at an email and say, all right, what is actually happening there? So the number of responses which we are getting from first level emails, or let's say follow-up emails combined, is higher than what it was earlier. Right. So I think, quite honestly, I think phone-based prospecting is a little bit challenging because finding people numbers and all that, GDPR and all those things. And obviously our strategy is not to directly pick up phones and call. But overall, from a prospecting perspective, our numbers are much better than where they were earlier.
So this is where it has helped in terms of processes. Now, on the front of team, how do you ensure top-notch performance by your team? Like, what are some strategies which you have used and have got good results from good effort by your team?
Interesting. So again, there are a few things which are really important. First of all, if I may give a little bit of background, we as a company, we are headquartered in Raleigh in North Carolina, but we have our offices in India, offices in Bangalore and Chennai. But even before that, so I'm based in Pune. I work from home, right? I have the India team is based somewhere is in Bombay, somewhere is in Delhi, somewhere is in Bangalore. They might not have gone to our office for the last 2 years. So we are a very aggressively work from home company, as you know. Along with the other workplace policies which we have, we don't really have a challenge where you work. So by nature, we are a distributed team, not just sales, but even within the organization itself. So the biggest challenge when I started working here about 3 years ago, the biggest challenge which I foresee was, how do you inculcate trust and collaboration amongst disjointed teams which are distributed, who don't really meet maybe once, maybe for a couple of days every month, right? How do you create trust? Because for a sales organization to function, it is not just sales people within themselves who need to have trust. You have the whole organization which is supporting them, and you need to create a sense of camaraderie. You need to create a sense of collaboration between those people. How do you do that if you are never meeting face to face? And maybe I forgot the guy's face. I met him once. I met 15 people. I forgot one guy's name and face. How do you really create that? So that was one thing which I worked really hard on when I started. In fact, we continue to do that. The pandemic kind of impacted that sense of trust which you created, because now people have not met for a year. But because we invested so much at the start of before the pandemic to create that comfort level, we were able to get through it with all the team intact and a very healthy level of camaraderie and help support which everybody needs. So one thing which I think which is really important, which people neglect, is to ensure foster a feeling of trust and camaraderie in your team. That does not mean that sales guys don't behave like sales guys, right? Sales guys are sales guys. We all need we all love business. We all love the incentives coming into our own pockets. How do you ensure that people help others while and also ensuring that there is value in them to help others? So that's what we invested in a lot. Number one. Number two, during this whole chaotic time, and one thing which has really helped us is that we have been very, very nimble when it comes to reading what the customer is looking for. I'll give you an example, right? Right when the pandemic hit last year, March, when we had, I think, those lockdowns or something else started, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes.
We figured out what is it that people really need at that point of time. And unlike a lot of other people who are still going in with their long-term multi-million engagements, trying to sell a customer $1 million worth of stuff, which the customer can utilize across the next 10 year, couple of years, we realized that everybody's threshold vision has shrunk. Nobody is really looking beyond 3 months, 6 months at the max, right? The long term pretty much was pretty much flat. And what we did as a company was very nimbly, and our leadership did a brilliant job there at coming up with offerings which were geared towards and helping companies survive the next 3 months, next 6 months. It was purely geared towards supplier risk and understanding which one of your suppliers is at risk of, let's say, shutting down because their factories are closed out, or where they don't have access to temporary labor, or they don't have access to raw materials, etc. So for companies, it is really important at that point of time to understand which one of my suppliers is risky, or going to be risky, or might be shutting down the next 6 months. So that the moment we created a packaged offering around this, we were ridiculously busy. The whole first lockdown period was where we had zero time to do anything else. It was one of the busiest times I've ever been in. It really worked, but it worked primarily because we were nimble, and we continue to be nimble. Third thing which we do really well is we invest in data analytics a lot. Understanding your own data is, I think, the magic bullet. Know what data you already have. There is a ton of data we are capturing. We are capturing sales data. You have SDR data, you have research data, you have external data. There is just so much data coming in. How do you figure out what is happening? So when was the last time you looked at your sales pipeline in detail and understood each and every components of it and found out what are those gems? Are there any data mining gems, so to speak, which you can find out? So we do that work as well, looking at data, using our own data analytics team, which again does a brilliant job, and really finding those hotspots of a combination of maybe a region and a vertical and a seniority level and a revenue band and etc., and finding that pocket which is amenable to buying more fast. So I think these are the three things which we do really, really well. In terms of to create a better trust between teams, spend a lot of time, focus on that. Be very nimble in understanding where the market is going. Understand your own self, and figuring out what are the best ways to do. So it's like I tell my team, right, that you know how to fish. What we are figuring out is where is the fish, right? Where do you go? Where is the fish? Where do you go to fish actually? You know how to do it already. All of these guys are great sales guys. What we are trying to help them is figuring out where they should fish. That's pretty much it, Mohit.
Yes, great. In fact, great insights. A salesperson is not failed because he doesn't know how to sell. It's because he's not meeting the right customers. And
absolutely,
if as a team you can help him get to the right people, everyone will feel confident and great about it. In fact, a very good insight.
That's a job as sales leaders, right? Our job is to make others successful, your sales team successful. If they are heroes, you become heroes.
So how much is there some specific coaching guidelines or technology you follow to uh, make sure this information goes down to them, or it's just on a requirement basis that you feel that there's a lot of data coming in, there's data coming in that this person is not doing well? Is that when you reach out to him and tell that, okay, how do we make it better, or do you have a general process towards coaching and enablement?
Yeah, actually, yes, I do. My philosophy towards coaching and mentoring people is very straightforward. I believe that people inherently want to do better, right? That's what I start off. I trust that the other person wants to improve. That's where you start from, right? There is will for somebody to improve. What I want to then figure out is what is the right way in which you can motivate this particular person. A lot of it is focusing on communication, right? As again, as a corollary to one of the topics points which I raised earlier, which is to create trust between teams. At the start of the when this team was founded, I used to do daily 15-minute huddle, right? Every day 15 minutes. There's nothing much coming in. There might not be anything at all to discuss in those 15 minutes. But that is something which gets everybody to talk, right? To understand what is happening. And after some time, you slowly kind of reduce it to twice a week. Now we are down to once a week, etc. Now everybody looks forward to those kind of, right? It really helps. But when it comes to individual people, I want to ensure that they understand the thinking behind successful sales pitches, successful sales conquests, so to speak. I don't want them to learn, hey, this guy gave this presentation, I will learn that presentation exactly, go and give it. That does not work. That is not scalable. And I've looked at I've heard of and I've seen a few companies where they expect you to learn a PPT by rote, and even if one word is here and there, they'll be like, what the hell? So sorry. So I think what is more important for me for my salespeople is to understand why a particular pitch or a particular decision was taken from a sales side when you are pitching to or you are running through a particular sales cycle. I want them to be able to come to me and understand and ask why, but then I expect them to understand once next time they come across something like this, they should understand what is to be done. So I prefer to empower my people by working with them, saying, okay, let's look at your pipeline, let's figure out where are those areas. I prefer to do a lot of Excel jugglery before I start talking, so I can understand where are those pockets. As I said, I believe that they want to improve. So instead of saying, why are you doing it and why are you not really going out on the field and making hundreds of calls every day? My focus is on figuring out, let's see what you have done which has worked. How can we replicate that? What have others done which has worked? How can I teach you how you can replicate a portion of maybe all of it? And that's what we try to do. The more important thing is to ensure that they become better salespeople rather than better transactional folks. I would, if the day they don't come to me and saying, DJ, just come to me for say hi to the client, and because they expect some VP to come in, I'll be very, very happy. That has happened for a lot of people. Because it ensures that it's a sustainable business. It ensures it's scalable. I can invest the same energy in 10 new people, and it becomes scalable and sustainable. So that's where I come from in terms of supporting my team.
Yes, truly on the point. What would you, as sales people and leaders, we are success is small part of the whole journey. Mention some failures or according to you things which should not be done by a salesperson, but you did it.
But I did it. Pretty much be hypocritical for me to say don't do this, but yeah, I did it. So I don't think it's probably going to be a good answer.
No,
but
just lessons. What we are trying to get out of this is just lessons of your sales processes.
An interesting thing for somebody to think about, and let me coach it that way, right? Especially somebody who's at the start and the mid of their career. is figuring out if you are a firefighter. If you are one of those guys who everybody turns to and says, yeah, there is a fire, please come and do something about it, right? Where you know that your back is to the wall, where you know that if you don't perform, you're probably out in the next 3 months, 6 months. But if you do, the payoff is huge, right? So you got to know if you are that kind of a guy, because it takes some doing, right? It's not if you go in expecting to be lucky, doesn't work, right? Santa Claus comes once in a year. So I realized very early that I am one of those guys, right? Which means what I did was find where are the fires and raise my hand up and say, I'll do something about it, right? Give me 3 months, give me 6 months, I'll do something about it. And you really know what you really need to know what you're doing. Sometimes it was luck, sometimes it was preparation, but it was increasingly preparation and following best practices. Even in Vero, for example, when I started, we set up a new team from scratch, from essentially zero revenue. Setting up a team, understanding what you are selling, where you are selling, who you are selling it to, how should you do it. Again, happy to raise my hand. So my advice to people would be, if you must, just to rephrase your question, if you must be one of those guys where people turn to and say, can you help? Right? If you do it, brilliant. The payoff is huge. You are on the next level, right? If you don't do it, yeah, it's a game. If you figure out what you do, what could you do better, try it again next time. So that's what I did a lot, and I continue to do, and that's something which I would encourage people to think.
Great, great. So, on general, what are some of the things that, like some characteristics which you have seen that these do not work for you to be successful in sales?
Okay, good question. Again, it's a slightly broader talk question because it really depends on what you are selling as well. Obviously, the market you are in, right? Let me take an analogy of our market. In our situation where we are kind of we were creating a market for our team and what we are selling at the start. What did not work for us are people who are very closeted or very hidebound in their approach, right? I get a pitch, I go and give this presentation, then I follow step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, I go to negotiation. It does not work. In a lot of sales, in our sales process, for example, we are always looking for ways in which we can figure out where is the value, and if I find a sniff of where the customer is looking for value, if you have to go from A to D, you go to A to D, cut few steps in middle. The point is that the customer thinks that customer gets the value which the customer needs to get, right? Or perceives that there is. So from our perspective, what did not work for us were salespeople who were very linear in their approach. We were always looking for salespeople who are either very aggressive, but also not particularly focusing purely on the linear way and are innovative in terms of figuring out what is the best way in which we can drive a particular account. And that helps because then it feeds off itself. The one guy does something amazing, goes and talks to somebody else in our huddle, in a daily huddle. Next thing I know, 3 other people are trying it. Next thing I know, 5 people have come up with a completely new approach, which we never thought of 2 weeks ago. So that's how organizations work. So that's how you create a fast moving team. So I think to answer your point, from our perspective, we are always looking for people who are figuring out ways in which they can innovatively navigate through the complex process. People who are, and there is a huge niche, or there is a huge area for people who are great at linear selling, and that's a great market, and people make their livings there, and it is brilliant. I know some really brilliant people who do that. Nothing wrong with it, just that it does not probably work in ours. It's like a bus, right? One of my mentors used to mention that everybody is going on a bus, but just that maybe the bus is going somewhere else and you have to be somewhere else. Just get off the bus and get on the right bus. So yeah, what does not work for us are people who are very linear in their approach. We are looking for people who are purely innovative and looking at different ways to sell.
In fact, yeah, for enterprise sales, your analogy, and majorly throughout enterprise sales, it cannot be linear. You have, it is multi-threaded, it is multi-value, multiple reasons, and anywhere where enterprise is involved, it's difficult to just
It's
follow
difficult.
that. I will give you a pitch only after you have answered 3 questions, or I will give you value.
Mohit, it's slightly dependent on how commoditized is the product or service which you're selling, right? I mean, if you are, let's say, in the business of standard IT support services, if there are 1,500 such companies out there, right? Everybody talks about, hey, I will deliver value, but if you come down to it, essentially, it is essentially the same thing, right? It is a very commoditized market. So if you talk about hardware, right? It's a very commoditized market. It's still enterprise deals. So I think there is always going to be a element of complexity, less or high. So some deals might be a little bit more complex because of multiple stakeholders, as you said. But the process might be linear, right? So the way the sales goes, the process might be, hey, we will do a first level, then we'll do a pilot, then we will do a proof of concept, then we'll do this, then I'll solicit feedback, then I will do a negotiation. In certain cases, so the process might be linear, the sale might be complex. What I'm talking about is the process itself does not need to be linear in quite a few cases. And I would urge people who are listening to this podcast to think about if there is a way in which their own sales process cannot be linear, right? And they could figure out alternate ways to arrive at the same goal, which is the client sees value.
Totally get that. So yeah, thanks. Really great insights around a lot of things. What do you think would be a salesperson 10, 15 years down the line? Do you think the principles would still remain the same, or automation could make it easier at some sort? What's just general opinion? How you see 10, 15 years down the line?
Okay, if I look at the crystal ball, see, I think I told you, I'm a great fan of best practices. I think they will still remain the same. The mode of delivery might change. I don't really see any huge technological change coming up in the next 10 to 15 years. Right? I mean, we'll suddenly not get holograms and stuff like that in the next 10 to 15 years. That's probably way too far ahead of what we'll probably get. So you'll pretty much see what you are doing, what you are getting now. There will be incremental changes, right? Air travel might become faster. You might be able to go and meet people much more than normal, etc. Geopolitical issues might come up here and there, etc. All those things will. These are just samplers, but I think overall sales will be sales. Best practices of how you understand who are your clients, what do you talk about, what do you sell, what does he buy, how do you prove value. I think they'll stay like that for time immemorial. I don't think that's changing. The way people impart that knowledge might change, but overall, I think sales is going to be pretty much the way it is. And people who understand how nimbly they can move their own sales processes are going to be the leaders of the future.
Do you see more productization of many software products or services products, which are
100%?
So there, do you think a shift in role of a salesperson compared to, let's say, what Biro is doing now? And if there's productization, do you feel there's a new way of doing things which should be done?
That's a very interesting question, and I didn't really think about it from that angle. But I completely agree to an extent. There is, as I said, there is already a lot of commoditization in terms of the market, right? Even if you look at an enterprise class solution like an SAP, you would see there are so many SAP shops. A lot of SAP work is still commoditized, right? To an extent, people start talking of what's an FTE rate, right? If you have to provide a support. So I think depending on the tiers of work which you are doing, there will be more and more commoditization coming in, certainly. So, for example, we have a team which focuses purely on customers who are small in size, right? A few $100 million, below $1 billion. And they're primarily based in India. Their task is to quickly turn around transactional deals. a few thousand deals, a few $1,000 here, a few $1,000 here, but do it quickly, right? That is one team which can pretty much be commoditized down the line. It's already kind of heavily commoditized. As more and more people jump up on our platform, and as more and more customers keep increasing, which they are doing phenomenally. I think that is one of those areas which will become which might be automated to an extent, right? Going forward. At the top end of it, but at a higher tier, I don't see there is too much which the sales guy has to fare in terms of update or in terms of getting replaced by a system. I don't think there is going to be that much. We just agreed that creating relationships, understanding value, etc., is important. As long as it's a push-based sale, a sales guy is always going to be important. If it's a pull-based sale, then yeah, pull-based sales are always going to be under problem because it's easy for you to provide a window there for somebody to click madly a few times and buy something. So I think it's still going to be pretty much the same, except the encroach of these systems is inevitable. Smart sales people will know which market they are in and figure out where do they need to be in the next 2 to 4 years.
Great. So yeah, in fact, this is actually a right point where push-based nothing can be replaced because it depends on Dushyant Joshi's and Mohit Ambani's and XYZ's style of doing it. But pull-based, many things can get more easier. Whoever is managing it. Totally agree to that. Wherever products are being developed to make it pull-based, we are seeing salespeople moving to some other roles as well. Like it becomes more of account management, support, and things like that. Truly get that. So yeah, coming to the end of this podcast, just a small rapid fire or opinion based questions.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Till when do you think monetary incentives would be there for a salesperson in always? You think there's not going to be any replacement of that?
Why would there be?
Other roles do not have monetary target-based incentives. And
I told you I'm a sales guy at heart, right? One of the things which I love to tell my people when I hire them, when I walk into the office, I look at my laptop. When I walk out of the office, I look at my wallet. Right? If either of them is not full, or then you're not doing a good job. If my sales guys are earning money, which means my company is earning money, right? So I think that monetary, I mean that school of thought. If there are other incentives which people get, if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy and all that, absolutely true, and I completely buy that. And everybody needs recognition. Everybody needs a sense of self-actualization, self-worth, etc. But I don't think the monetary rewards are going to go away soon, unless somebody figures out a way to remove money from the equation altogether. But that's not going to
happen. Great. Yeah. So just adding on that front, do you think most of the companies have monetary incentives on closure, on revenue? Do you think it should be on effort as well? The right principles they're following it, but not getting results.
One of the principles when you're deciding or creating an incentive policy, having created many and learned from some of the best out there, what you measure improves, right? What you measure matters. If I want what I incentivize improves. If I incentivize cash in, right, money hitting my bank, that is what people are going to focus on. If I incentivize invoiced, that's what people focus on. As Bero, for example, we focus on our incentives are based on cash in. Not when I have invoiced, not whether contract is signed or not. What only thing is when does the money hit my bank? The day it hits it, the next day you get it, right? That works beautifully for us. So everybody knows the sales process. You know what type of cash in payment terms or invoicing terms to expect. That's one. But coming back to what you mentioned, I think it is critical to realize that when I create an incentive policy for people, you have to factor in multiple stages. So they can be KRAs, but KRAs would be different from your incentives. KRAs as in, for example, I do look at my sales guy and talk about, hey, what's your conversion ratio from, let's say, creating an opportunity to taking it to 50%, right? Or taking it to a 75% opportunity stage, right? Or various stages in between. I will evaluate that. I will give that guy a soft target. I will talk about, hey, tell me how you are moving, what kind of pipeline you are generating. Because last thing I want is for the guy to make all his incentives from one deal and sit for the rest of the year doing nothing, right? So we will judge that. We will have KRAs. But when it comes to incentivizing, effort-based incentives for sales, it's a great idea. But I don't know whether it is objective enough. It's very subjective, right? Who decides what an effort is? If a successful effort, is it an effort? An unsuccessful effort is still an effort, right? How do I incentivize it? Should I incentivize them same? Should I incentivize them less? I'm a big fan of if a work is done, whether it is done or not is more important. Whether I got a valid reason that why it was not done doesn't matter. Whether you got a deal or not, right? Whether you got a deal or not, that is more important.
That's
whether
right.
you
Yes.
spent a lot of time in that deal, but it didn't work through, the deal didn't come. So I don't think the effort one is the right way to go. But then again, if somebody has figured out a way to create such a plan, I would love to hear. I would love to understand what they are all about.
Great. So, do you think there should be competition among teammates, various teams maybe? But do you want those
100%.
leaderboards saying?
100%. 100%. Absolutely. We do follow a sales leaderboard. Has to be healthy competition. Obviously, I think everybody would tell you the same thing. It has to be healthy. It has to be constructive. It cannot be below the belt, right? And that's one of my jobs as a sales. And I think that's where the trust comes from. So you create enough trust, competition becomes healthy. And people know what. So absolutely 100%. Sales guys are competitive by nature. And having competition is absolutely the right way to go.
Just winding it up now on a little bit of an easier note. Which is the best excuse you have heard from your teammate or your colleague for not performing up to the mark or not completing that KPI?
I can't repeat that here. I know exactly the question. I have a fantastic answer for that. I can't repeat it here. The best excuse I got. Yeah, there was it's a brilliant answer. One of the persons I had hired back in Delhi many years ago. He went to a client one day over in Manesar somewhere, and he was meeting the MD, and suddenly there was a fire in their plant, right? So he had to come back. The story continues, right? So he set up he took a long time. The plant was devastated. It took some time. He spent a lot of time. Then he set up another meeting. So he reached that place and he found everybody, including the receptionist, was crying. It's like, what happened? Like his father passed away. Exactly that same time, right? The CEO never gave him another meeting. Then he went to a third client. And he was standing outside the client. He had reached a little bit early. So he was having some chai sutta. And he called and he saw a bunch of people running into the building. And he called the client. And the client said in Hindi, right? Is it okay if I say that in Hindi?
Yes, yes.
The client said, अंदर मत आना, IT raid पड़ी है. So he called me and said, DJ, yeah, मैं client के यहाँ नहीं जा पा रहा हूँ. So, and what he did was he started using that as an icebreaker in his client meetings, which I don't think was a good idea at all, right? And so the best excuse which I got from him was, DJ, मैंने सबको बता दिया, कोई meeting नहीं दे रहा.
That is one of the best stories I have heard. Like
I had clients call me because I went and told somebody, hey, I have a sales guy who does that. If you don't give me business, I will send him to meet you. So one day a client called me, say, is your sales guy near Connaught Place by any chance? I said, why? यार हमारे यहाँ आग लगी है. So I called him, bhai, where are you? Boss, I'm at Connaught Place.
Wow, wow.
Yeah, that's the
I
best
think
news I've heard.
this is one of the best stories I've heard. Anyone who will be in that, अरे यार ये आ गया तो मेरा तो हो जाएगा इस बार.
Yeah, yeah, but he's doing really, really well now. Microsoft, he's doing great for himself. But yeah, it's one of those stories which, and the guy was genuine. Like, reason मैं क्या करूँ, meeting ही नहीं मिलता. So yeah, it's just probably ending on a great.
Great, great. Thanks. Thank you so much, Dushyant. Thank you for your time, and it was a great session. Good insights. I hope everyone gets something good out of it.
Thank you so much for inviting.